Ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. I think you'll all agree that we had a wonderful day yesterday. Our first day really turned out very well. Looking at the theme, ICT and the human factor. And that means that both things, ICT and the human factor, are the agents of social and economic transformation. And we had some really interesting and exciting presentations and workshops and so on, covering the 4 tracks on best practices, on the reform of teacher education, on the evaluation of ICT, and on technology leadership and learning, e-learning. And our first speaker this morning is going to continue that track on assessment. Steve Connolly is the Group Digital Director at Hodder Education. And he will tell you what that is all about when he talks. And at Hodder Education, he's responsible for developing and delivering digital strategy, including the award-winning dynamic learning platform, Assessment Bank, and Rising Stars, Hodder Education online assessment services. Over the past few years, one of Steve's points of focus has been on working with colleagues to ensure that workflow across departments and the division's software applications will ensure scalable and cost-effective delivery of enhanced e-textbooks direct to the market. Additionally, he's currently heading up a national initiative and national means UK, right? To deliver an online exam question bank for an internationally recognized UK awarding body. Partner organizations with which Steve has collaborated and published include the UK Department for Education, Microsoft, Apple, the Globe Theatre, and I'd love to hear about that, and awarding bodies including OCR, Cambridge International Examination, City and Guilds, EdXL, aka AQA, and WJEC, Stroke, EduCAS, and CCEA. And I'm sure that Steve is going to explain what all those acronyms are all about in his presentation. He also speaks regularly at conferences and industry forums, and most recently at the Education Ministry in Singapore, and we're certainly very glad that he has agreed to be a speaker here this morning. And so I'm now going to invite Steve to address us on the topic, Making Assessment Work for Educators and Learners in the Digital Space. Clap, 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 clap.
Good morning. First, I tell you, I think I'm going to be speaking here, so I'll try that. Thank you very much indeed for a fantastic start to the conference and a lovely way to start the day as well with the music. It's a very kind introduction, and you forget what you've written when you write these things, and you have to then explain what all of those things mean. But basically, Hodder Education is a large primary, secondary, and vocational publisher in the UK and internationally, and we have a Caribbean office based in Kingston, Jamaica, and my colleagues are here, Denise and Rivoli. And we publish across a range of subjects and across a range of areas across the curriculum. But most particularly, we're doing a lot of work in the assessment area at the moment. And I should just say now, although I'm going to talk in terms of digital, what I want to do is give you a bit of background to how assessment is being used in different contexts and how digital makes the use of that assessment data, primarily, really very helpful for both students, teachers, and parents, in fact, and that we can start to think about the way assessment's used to improve learning as well as benchmark achievement. We're a major assessment provider in the UK, and we work with a range of awarding bodies, as everyone outlined. Notably, I'm going to show you something that we're doing Cambridge examinations, Cambridge assessment in the UK a little later on. We also provide a range of digital tools and resources, and as I said last night, for those of you who were at the cocktail reception, we're very keen to leverage all of the digital developments we do for the UK and internationally, so that all of the territories that we serve, including the Caribbean, benefit from that as far as is absolutely possible. No, I'm okay. We also, as was said earlier, do collaborate enormously with the tech firms. And one of the things that we as educational publishers have to accept is that whereas we can control books, we can't control the ecosystem that's out there. And I think that's the same for educators. IT in the classroom is absolutely fantastic when it works. But just as you get familiar with something, someone changes it completely. You know, Google changes and you've got to relearn it and that kind of stuff. And I don't put the blame at Google's door or Microsoft or anyone else. But I think one of the things that we're very keen to do is try and provide you with tools which are straightforward to use and really can add benefit quickly and effectively. Because there's nothing worse than an educator having to learn how the technology gets used before you even get into the classroom. And then when you get there, it doesn't work. So we're putting a lot of effort into trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, so the talk is designed to really introduce you to the themes of assessment. And when I talk about assessment, I'm not talking about online assessment only. I'm really talking a lot about print. Hodder Education and Rising Stars, which is the primary division within Hodder, produce an awful lot of very successful printed assessments of different types. What I wanted to do was to introduce you to some of the different types of work we're doing in the UK context and how we think it has relevance to the Caribbean as a whole. So the themes for today, the different types of assessment, and looking at the learner as a whole, one of the things we're talking about here is the human factor in IT. Now, assessment is only a snapshot of a child's attainment or achievement or learning, but it can tell us an awful lot as educators about what their strengths and weaknesses are and how to actually help them improve. Because, let's face it, the role of an educator is to identify how to get the best out of young people that we're teaching. And if we use the tools and the assessments that we create effectively, we can do that. Tied to that is assessment for learning. So not assessment as a snapshot of just achievement, but actually what does assessment tell us in terms of intervention? How are we going to make the biggest difference when we identify a strength or weakness and take them forward from where they are? The reliability of data. I would always contest, actually, that as assessment providers, we are selling data as much as we are the assessments themselves. So when you put a test in front of a child, is it the questions that matter, or is it the outcome that you have as an educator when you mark that piece of work? Well, obviously, both things are very important. But actually, without good questions, you don't get good data. But without data that you can then use effectively to actually help the child move on, then it's a fruitless exercise. And real-time data, this is where the digital dimension comes in. And what we're very keen to do is take teachers to a point where they have data collated up in the cloud and that they can start making use of that and analyzing it in such a way that they can benchmark their achievements of their students against students in other schools who are also taking those assessments. Because what you as educators also want to do is know where that you sit in the wider context of the community. And that is where digital comes into its own. Digital should be the means to an end, and it's a very good way of collating that data and allowing you to analyze it and benchmark not just your students, but the performance of your students against others. And visualizing data. There are theses written on the visualization of data, but if you think about, I don't know if anyone was here to see the digital showcase last night, but it was fascinating to me that we saw this fantastic interface technology where we had bracelets where it would project your iPhone screen onto your wrist and you could just tap on there. But all of this is visualization of data. If you think about your daily use of IT, whether it's email or it's cloud-based services or it's train timetables or buses or whatever, The thing that makes the difference is how accessible and how useful that data is in the way it's presented. And again, what we're trying to do is reduce the burden on the educator in terms of how they input data, but also how they can use it, visualize it, and share it with other people, including students and parents. And finally, it's the online services that make this happen, whether we like it or not. And I know connectivity is always an issue, and believe it or not, it's an issue in UK schools as well. But the collation of that data in one place, i.e. up in the cloud, is what makes the difference, because we can then start collating all of this information against a single profile for that student and get a rounded picture of their attainment through different types of assessment throughout their learning career. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit was the different contexts for assessment as well. Sometimes we think about it in a summative way. So you've taught for a term and you want to test whether they've learned the stuff that you've put in front of them. But we know that good teaching is also about independent learning and encouraging that in students. It's about iterative assessment. It's about benchmarking them in specific skills and topics as you go. And it's also then about pulling together different strands of assessment and doing gap analysis. And this is where the digital side of things comes in. And from our point of view, what we also want to do is use data to develop assessment over time. Because one of the things that we're very keen to do is obviously check that the questions and the materials and the tests that we're putting out there are actually effective. And by us analysing anonymously data which is gathered by teachers, what we can do is start looking at whether questions are levelled at the correct level, and whether they're sitting in the right type of tests, and whether those tests are actually delivering what teachers would expect. And that way we can almost adjust them over time. And standardised assessment is something that's really very helpful in that area, which I'll show you a bit more about in a minute. So I thought I'd give you a bit of a context for the UK, purely because things have changed quite significantly in the way teachers are now expected to assess to what were levels and is now their teacher judgment about attainment. Now, this is quite a step change in the UK because up until about 2 years ago, the national curriculum wasn't just based around a programme of study where for every subject, each of the things that you had to teach were laid out in very clear terms. But teachers also were given a very, very clearly delineated set of levels and sub-levels to teach to. Now, when I say teach to, that's a bit of a loaded statement because actually that's what the government who came in and changed all of this were actually wary of. Because levels, instead of being a kind of benchmark of attainment for a child in, say, mathematics, fractions, grade 4, actually became a very blunt way of reporting on their attainment. So when parents were given their end-of-term reports, very often they would ask the question, well, what's a level 3C or what's a level 4B? Is that what my child would be expected to show? So what ended up happening is that levels, they are being reviewed and the way in which they're used are being reviewed, but they have disappeared, and the emphasis is much more upon the educator coming to judgments about pupil attainment. Now, this is a really massive change because levels have been around for nearly 20 years in the UK. So you have a generation of teachers who've actually used them very heavily. And initially, I think they felt quite bereft. They felt set adrift because they didn't know how to benchmark pupil attainment. I think that's changing because they're beginning to be realizing that they've been empowered to make good decisions about where their children are attaining and where their gaps in knowledge are, and it empowers them. But what that means is that they do need reliable sources of testing, assessment, and data on which to base their judgments. Because the problem is, if I look at a piece of work and I judge it to be at a certain level, but there is no framework, no national framework against which to assess it, then how do I know that the school down the road isn't assessing the same piece of work at a much higher level? So it's a tricky one. And the strange thing is in all of this is that we still have national tests. The key one is at Key Stage 2, actually, the end of primary. But we still have national tests that assess the core skills in English and in mathematics. And we do have some benchmarking in science and phonics as well in Key Stage 1. But that means that that is a national measure, particularly at Key Stage 2, where it's a national test, they're set, and then they're marked to a national standard. And it's very revealing then if teachers have actually been assessing their children formatively all the way up to that point as to whether their judgment about how kids are doing is actually accurate. So all this means that they have to be sure that when they're measuring attainment and progression in a formative and summative way throughout teaching, that they are actually being accurate, that they've got a reliable means of doing that. And that's where people like Hodder Education and Rising Stars come in. And what we want to do is try and provide them with ways of not just using the data to measure those things, but also to improve the teaching and learning as well. So effective interventions are important. This is where we start getting remediation. And we're not just talking about the child knows this and the child does not know that, but it's also about how do we intervene. And this is what good educators have done for millennia. But the fact is, we are under more and more pressure as nations across the globe to actually improve national standards. And the improvement comes not just from benchmarking, but also to intervening effectively. And that means there's an onus on companies like us who also produce curriculum resources to be able to link outcomes to intervention and remediation through the resources that we provide. Because there's one commodity that all teachers complain about not having, and that's time. And actually, effective intervention based upon outcomes from assessment take time to actually look through and define. And they've got to be able to rely on what's being said to them. So if I benchmark a child to a standardized score for mathematics, how do you know that it's accurate? And finally, we want to be able to provide both focus and depth. So in other words, we want you to be able to look at information in a digital arena when you've gathered data from assessment and be able to look at question item level data, but also in the breadth of not just a subject, but also strands within a subject. So for instance, within English, it might be grammar, punctuation, and spelling, or reading. Or in mathematics, it might be geometry, fractions, whatever. So these are the different types of assessment that we use predominantly, or we produce. There's progression, a progress tests, which are iterative. You use them throughout the teaching year. We provide summative optional tests, which are termly. And we also provide standardized assessment. And standardized assessment is very, very useful from the point of view of benchmarking the attainment of your students against an already standardized cohort that's taken the same test prior to them being released to the market. And we also have informal formative testing. There were some people here yesterday who might have been at the workshop that we held on student e-textbooks, and one of the things that we are pledging is that any commissioning and publishing that we do for the Caribbean will have enhanced e-textbooks that are available on mobile for students to download. And one of the things that we're doing is embedding informal tests which they can take on an ad hoc basis or as directed by the teacher. And we're going to collate, or we already are, collating information that comes from the informal assessment up into the cloud so that you get live reporting as they're taking their tests in the e-books. And also, one of the things, I used to teach many years ago, and my abiding memory was preparing some students at 16 for their GCSE exams and standing with a pile of papers that I had to cut up physically and stick down question by question where I wanted to mix and match questions from different papers. And that was so that I could focus on different skills and that kind of thing. Well, why should we have to do that? We shouldn't. These are all items. Questions are just things that you can combine into a test. So if you can actually go to a searchable item bank and start producing your own bespoke tests and assessments and be able to mark them and then analyze the data, that's again where digital is absolutely at the forefront. It's just a simple, everyday task that we have to do, but it's made simpler and more effective. Okay, so I'll move on to the digital aspect of all of this in a second, but the thing that unifies all of this is data. So if you think about schools in general, it's really rather dull, but it's true to say that admin and data drives really effective education. Not because it should be the means to an end, but it's a way in which you can actually analyze and improve the way in which the school and the students are educated. And I would contest that without online platforms, the gathering and analysis of data is a very time-consuming and very laborious task. So we use it in a number of ways. Diagnostic is essentially just looking at strength and weakness. Predictive, and this is where standardized assessment comes in, we can actually not just say this is how a child has progressed based upon the tests they've taken, but this is where we think they will be in 3 tests' time. Now, this is really important because if you're intervening and you want to make sure that students are improving at the rate at least of the expected attainment, but if you want to exceed that as well, then you need to have a measure against which you can go back and review. So I'll whiz through this. I've touched on some of these, but the really important bit for me is, as a parent, I know that I would love to have a really good, well-rounded view of how my child is doing in the school. And I think a holistic view and the use of assessment and data to provide a rounded view of a student is really, really important. And it's something that we can derive from that data in the cloud. So here's the first picture, and I've got lots more now, so you don't have to look at that much text, you'll be glad to know. But what I'm trying to say here is that we have a plethora of information, and I think this is where government can come into play, very, very predominantly actually. You imagine if you had a record that sat in a database in the cloud, and you could collect all of the information against a child's learning throughout their primary and secondary years. And imagine for a moment that you could, as an educator, go to a dashboard and you could slice and dice all of that information based upon the requirements of either a parent report or a school report, or making sure that they're well prepared for their public examinations, or they're making their transition from primary to secondary in a very effective way. Now, if you have to look through paper records, that's an awful lot of data for you to have to sift through. Whereas if you can go to one single profile, a unified profile for that student, and pull up that information, you can create bespoke reporting very, very easily. It doesn't happen, by the way, at the moment. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the digital aspects of what we do. And as I said at the beginning, we sell far more printed assessments in the UK than we do online assessments. And it's interesting to me that I've been reading predictive reports from newspapers and trade education magazines for a long time that says all examinations will be taken online in 10 years' time. Well, I read that about 15 years ago, and it's still not the case. And there are some things that it's actually pretty tricky to assess online. You think about a history essay and how many different standard papers you'd have to analyze before you wrote a mark scheme, which was about 500 pages long, to actually get an algorithm to do what a really good marker would do, and you begin to realize why that is. But it is the case that the digital tools that we're providing are beginning to become just a de facto part of teachers' lives in the UK. I've already talked about the progress and optional tests, so I'm just going to show you how we support these through free online tools. So anyone who uses our assessments can go to a site called Rising Stars Assessment and build a profile for their school. And they can set up as many students as they want. And instead of marking those into physical mark books or into the Excel spreadsheets that many teachers are used to using, they can put them into online mark sheets. And this is just a useful way of gathering the data, but what it drives is really, really helpful. So one of the things we're starting to do is to try and provide teachers with a way of benchmarking their students in real time against all the users of the same assessments. So if you look at the information that's highlighted in the green text box here, you can see that each question for a particular test is broken down. What that has is a national average score for those people who've put their data into this system, which means that you can not only do a gap analysis and identify strengths and weaknesses for your students, but it means also that what you're able to do is to reflect upon how they are attaining against everyone in the country who's used that test. And this is something, if we adapt these assessments for the Caribbean, that we would make available to all teachers and schools. You can see here that from just inputting the raw scores at a question level, you can then run a series of reports for every single student within a class. And what that does, you can see the two lines here, the blue and the green. The blue line is the average for all students who've taken this test across the entire user group, any school. The green line is showing you that as a benchmark, your students are attaining higher. And then what you're able to do is analyze, and this again was where visualization of data becomes really important, the performance of individual students against that school average. And this goes a step further when we go to standardized assessments. Now, standardization is basically where we take something like our progress in reading or progress in maths tests, and before we publish them, these are termly tests that are in print and online, we actually standardize them with a user base of 25,000 students across an entire primary range. So all the way from reception in our years, all the way through to the age of 11. And we then look at the mix of gender and age when they took these tests, and we create standardized tables. Now, if I showed you the manual for each of these that teachers used to have to use to be able to mark and analyze the scores, they're about that thick. And every single page is like a big table of data where you have to take the child's age and gender and go across to their raw score and work out their standardized maths and reading score ages based upon the information that are in these tables. Now, we don't have to do that in the cloud. We don't have to do that using digital services. All we have to do is make a profile for the student which says what gender they are and what year and month they were born, and put in the raw scores for their tests. And then what comes out is a series of information which allows us to not only do gap analysis, both on items and strands. So here you can see a maths test where we've got the different strands broken down along the top of the column, and you can see through a kind of heat map how kids are doing in relation to that. But the real grunt work of digital comes in when you then generate the reports. You can see here that not only have we got the information about how they've done, but how they are going to do. Because we've standardized all of these tests, we can actually measure the attainment on a standardized curve. Now, you know that in any given population that takes a test, you'll always have people on the left-hand side of the bell curve and then people on the right. And what that means is that you're able to benchmark students against the attainment curve because we've already done that data. So if you just put in the test scores for an 11-year-old girl when she takes the age 11 autumn test, then we can benchmark that against that cohort. And over time, what we're going to do is analyze all of the scores that get put in on an anonymous basis and re-standardize that the whole time. And what this gives, again, is an ultimate measure for you in terms of how your kids are attaining against the standardized cohort. And without doing that exercise, you have no measure against which to base your judgments. I'll just show you here quickly that there are some group tests that we can produce as well. So you can analyze classes and groups and compare classes as well. And that's all off of the raw scores that get put into a very simple database form. One of the things that I'd love to show you, and I will leave you with a video in a minute, this is where we have these banks of questions that are going to be produced for the Caribbean, where teachers can actually search a database of tests and create their own bespoke versions. And I'll just play you a very quick video to give you respite from my voice and also give me a rest.
With the Higher Education Caribbean Assessment Bank, you can easily create and share bespoke tests tailored for teaching and revision sessions, as well as for more formal learning assessment. Choose a subject area and then use the search tools to find questions to make up your test. You can search for a specific question using a keyword or phrase. You can also filter by grade, topic, and skill. From the search results list, choose a question to preview it. The mark scheme and the scope and sequence statements are shown beneath. To include a question in your test, click Add to Test, or use the plus sign to quickly add questions directly from the list. To remove a question, click the minus sign or Remove from Test. The Organize tab shows at a glance the number of questions in the test. To change the order, simply click and drag individual questions and the test will update in real time. When you're ready to save your test, go to the Save and Share tab. Scroll down to see the questions, answers, mark schemes, and statements for the test. Before you save your test, give it a meaningful name. You can also specify a time limit. Tests are saved to your My Test area. Use export to PDF or docx format if you want a version you can print. In the export options, select the components you want to include. For a formal assessment, you may wish to add your school logo and a space for the pupil's name. Click the Generate button to create the file. You can also generate a web link that you can send out via email. Share with the rest of the school lets your colleagues also see and use your test. You can unshare it again if you need to. On the My Tests tab, you will see all of your own tests and any tests which have been shared with you. Consider using the assessment bank to display just one or two questions on the whiteboard to introduce a lesson or start a discussion. On the Higher Education Tests tab, you'll find a number of tests that have been pre-built and are ready for use. If you want to edit these tests, you'll first need to save a copy to My Test.
And I should say that Rona's can be hired out for a very, very cheap fee. I love her voiceover, it's brilliant. She's actually the publisher in the Kingston office. Right, I'm going to wrap up very quickly, but imagine that you could build tests in any way you wanted, slice and dice them, and then actually mark them. One of the things we're looking at is those mark sheets I showed you at the moment of a printed test. But if you could build your own fractions test and then have an online mark sheet that was built bespoke to that test, and you could put the data in, you could track everything that you were doing. And actually, again, it's not actually adding work, it's reducing work in a strange kind of way. Because you always mark tests and keep a summative score, but by the very act of marking them, you've already marked at an item level. And if you store that data, then what you're then able to do is analyze it in the way I've shown you. If anyone would like a sample test, then they can email me, and I'll put the details up at the end. But we've actually got a prototype site, but I can generate a PDF for you on the fly. Final things, we're working with Cambridge Assessment to deliver a GCSE exam bank. It's built out of the same technology, but we're using all of their questions to deliver a service to their customers. So we can actually use this in different contexts. It was originally built for primary, but we could use it for any number of organizations such as CXC or whoever. Finally, remediation and testing. I said a little bit about e-textbooks earlier on. One of the things we're putting a lot of emphasis on is providing them with the ability to open and take tests in an independent learning context. Now, these can also be taken on mobile. And importantly, this last image on here gives next steps based upon their attainment. So without you even having to do anything, what we're starting to do is map all of our resources and all of the page references to textbooks to the outcomes from the tests. This means that if they're unsure about a topic, they can go and learn for themselves. And it saves them time, it saves you time. And I have got a podcast, but I won't play it.
This podcast.
And all of that data that comes out for the student with all of the next steps as part of their independent learning also gets aggregated back to a dashboard for the teacher. And just to show you, it also works on their mobile phones in terms of the assessments as part of the ebooks. One of the final things I should talk about is some work we've done with a vocational awarding body in the UK. And what we're starting to do is actually build conditional pathways. What I mean by that is the outcomes of your assessment then determines the next thing that comes through to a student's dashboard. We have an online service called Dynamic Learning, and there are learners in the UK, predominantly learning vocational trades, who may not have got their public examinations in maths and English and who are working in the workplace and learning in the workplace as apprentices. But they still have to then get their qualifications in basic English and maths. And one of the key things here is that they can do that independently. So we're starting to build adaptive engines so that based upon their previous test outcomes, they start being given teaching materials as though the teacher was there intervening. So we gather together all of this information, and the last slide that I've mocked together is just a kind of collation of all the things that I've just shown you. So I talked about the need for there to be a single student profile. Now we're moving towards that with the services we're providing. Everything that we have shown you today is going to be stored in the cloud against one single profile, one user profile for a student. So whenever anyone sets up a student in any one of our systems, that will then be used by any of the other systems that we provide. And what that means is, when we get to it, and this is future gazing now, we could actually produce a report that went beyond just providing you with a snapshot for different types of assessment. It could actually allow you to say, I want to see English, maths and science, or in this case, maths and IT. I'd like to see their standardized test scores, and I'd also like to see the things that they've been doing in their ebooks, and I'd also like to see the next resources that they've been recommended to look at so that I can check whether or not they've actually used those things. So I hope that's been useful, and just to reiterate the fact that this is about digital and print, it's about a mixed economy, and it's about people using things the way that they need to use them for the benefit of the teachers and the learners. Thank you very much. And if you've got any questions at the end or after the next session, then please, my colleague Helen is in the audience and I'm about, so if you'd like to come and have a chat or to email me, then feel free and we'll send you some information through. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Steve. We're actually going to ask a few questions now, so I hope you're prepared for that. Okay. Well, Steve actually shared with us how much the potential for different types of assessment has, whether it's delivered in print or online, and how it can support the measurement of students' performance, progression, and understanding. He showed us how the cloud and unified student profiles facilitate the development of assessment programs and can continuously track learner progress, providing you have good and reliable data. And he stressed that. He shared with us also the potential for use of formative and summative assessments, what he refers to as bespoke assessment paper builders, standardized assessment, enhanced e-textbooks, and I think I'm going to ask him about that later on, and teacher-generated tests, and how all this can be used in terms of a remedial program. So we're going to open the floor now to you all for a few questions.
Yes, I just want to know how compatible this whatever program or software you use with the general school management systems that many schools are using.
Well, actually, that was one slide too many. I was going to put something in, and I thought, well, it's a bit like watching digital paint dry in a way, all of this stuff, because it's all the stuff that goes on under the hood. But in the UK, what's happening, because there are so many different management information systems out there, it's quite onerous for people like me to keep maintaining links with them. But thankfully, there are initiatives, there are companies, and including one that's part of one of the big academy chains in the UK, a very well-known academy chain, who are producing cloud-based services that will take the information from an MIS system. And for those of you who are uninitiated, it's basically where you store all of your data about pupils. And instead of you having to set up student profiles in our system, what it's going to do, and this is on the schedule for next year, is pull the key student data into our database, and we will then store the bespoke information that we need to be able to do all of that beautiful reporting that you've seen. But we'll also pass key pieces of data back to the MIS. So that, in other words, if you want to bring in the standardized scores and the raw scores, you'll be able to store them all in the MIS. But we're going to work with third-party providers because then they have to maintain the services and we don't, to put it bluntly. Go, Denise. That's it. Oh, no.
Thank you. Okay, I saw that you have this data bank for questions.
Yes.
What about Caribbean-based questions? And is it possible for us to add our own questions to this?
Okay, so what I didn't show you in the video, right, so first things first, we don't allow the writing of questions directly into the database. But the good thing is that you can export it in an editable Word document format. So we provide you with a bank of questions, which are all mark schemed and all the rest of it. But what teachers in the UK tend to do is then use their own questions as part of those. So they output the document and then they add in their own questions. I do think there is a place for us actually opening up a front-end tool in the website that will eventually allow them to build their own questions that will be an integral part of the output. But that's not currently there. On the question of actually creating Caribbean versions of the questions, we're already in the process of doing that. So. Gentleman over here. See, they're just doing it to wind her up. She's going from one side to the other. Yeah.
Yes, it seems the tool you're introducing would be more effective on a national scale, for example, in Jamaica. So, in your opinion, is this something that a government should seek to be acquiring for an entire system, or is this something that we should be looking at as individual schools?
I think, well, it depends on your viewpoint, ultimately. Obviously, the more people that input information into a system like the one I've shown you, the better, because what you're getting is a much broader view of attainment across an entire cohort on a live basis. Whether governments should buy tests or whether they should create their own tests, well, that's up to them. Usually what happens is that governments tend to put in place national testing at particular key stages. So as I outlined in the first slide on there, in the UK we have it in the reception year, that's kind of an informal benchmarking, and then we have age 6 tests and then very formal tests at age 11. But they are really a summative snapshot of that child's attainment at that stage. What we're aiming to do is provide iterative progression tests and standardized progression tests so that you can actually intervene at a much earlier stage than finding out the national test score before it's too late. I think there is a place for it, and those tests that I just showed you, the Puma and Pirate tests, are being adopted on a very wide level, not by government, but by schools. And what we're encouraging them to do is use all the free online tools, not only to help us improve the test, but also to benchmark on what could become a national basis. I mean, ideally, I think also, you know, looking at those, you would want to re-standardize those tests on a cohort in Jamaica. I was talking to a Chinese delegation a couple of weeks ago, and what they're interested in is re-standardizing the English reading test using a cohort of students in Beijing, and then comparing the standardized curve for students who are learning English as a second language against native UK speakers, because we've already got that information in the system. But for Jamaica, you would probably re-standardize against a cohort so that anything that came out was comparing it to that cohort. And over time, as more data went in, we could adjust that on a live basis. So I hope that goes some way to answering your question. But I think ideally everyone would use these because it's a very good measure.
One last question.
Yes.
All right, good day, sir.
Hi.
I'm sorry I was late for most of your presentation, but I was at your booth yesterday, and I was looking at your software, and it has a section there for lesson planning, right? I want to ask you if your software, in creating your STEM, if it automatically put in the high order variables and low order variables, or you have to manually do that.
I'm very sorry, could you repeat the last part of that? I didn't hear it.
Your lesson plan. I was looking at your software. I was at your booth looking at your software, realized I didn't have this section for lesson planning. And I'm asking you if when you're creating your STEM, your general objectives, if it will automatically put in your higher order variables or your lower order variables, or you have to manually put them in.
I'm really sorry, I've got this air conditioning in my ear and I can't hear the question. So I tell you what, why don't we have a chat afterwards? I'll come and find you. I think that's probably the best thing, yeah.
We have one more question.
Last question, please. Last question.
Good morning. Do you develop tests that are differentiated? That is, where age and stage are not the same. The test is diagnosed to be diagnostic?
Yes, we do, is the answer. And actually, in the assessment bank, the nice thing about that, as I said, if you're going to have progress tests, you're not able to have a progress test unless you have a progression framework that sits behind it, obviously, because you've got to benchmark questions in terms of difficulty. And to be able to differentiate, you've got to have differentiated questions, right? It stands to reason. So what we've done is provided a framework that allows you to select questions on the basis of differentiated skills, scope sequences, year groups or grades in your world. And then we map them. We've got a progression grid that they can be mapped to. I think one of the problems is standardized assessment is based upon age, gender at the time of taking a test. I mean, that's the basis. So the differentiation really comes from the outcome. Are you above or below average? But in terms of the differentiated tests that we produce, yes, we have them at different bank levels. So, yeah. Okay. Is that enough? Yeah.
Thank you again very, very much, Steve. It really has been an instructive and far-reaching presentation, and we're looking forward to the assessment for the Caribbean, the assessment bank for the Caribbean. I sincerely hope our government will take it up. Thank you. Can we give Steve another round of applause, please? And is this Dr. Shalit? Can you come for me, please? We now have Dr. East with us. Just come straight. Did you give them your presentation? Do they have it? Are you ready? Are you ready for Dr. East? I know she just came. You're good? All right. Just have a seat for me and then I'll just introduce you very quickly. All right. Now we're running a bit late, but I know you won't mind. We're waiting for Dr. East. You won't mind, you know, us running into your break and playground time. Dr. Shalit Ashman East. She's an educationalist and a successful entrepreneur. And she has a very exciting story to tell that I think would support how we started this morning when we listened to that really inspiring song, I Believe That We Can. Because it says here that she started out selling callaloo and plum at the Grand Spend stoplights. And she's now the CEO of Shalit East Group. And her group's operations span a virtual academy, award-winning online test preparation systems, software development, e-learning consultations, courseware development, computerized brain training, virtual office solutions, learning management system development, and inspirational speaking. If you saw her walking up here, you wouldn't think that she left school too long ago. Dr. East, through Go GSAT, that we're all very familiar with, introduced e-learning and online test preparations to students in grades 1 to 6 in Jamaica in 2005, and was at that time a revolutionary approach to improving student outcomes through the ICTs. Moving up and outwards in recent times, Shalit has forged innovative partnerships with some of the world's leading universities and the Caribbean's giant regional telecommunications companies in providing free access to her company's online test preparation content. And we need to ask her how she does that bit of it, that free access part. These partnerships have given online learning opportunities to a widening number of students preparing for national and regional examinations. Dr. East insists that the key to entrepreneurial success lies in having fixity of purpose, having your idea and then getting it done. The lessons she learned and challenges met and overcome as she was getting it done, will serve to guide the potential ICT for the entrepreneurs among conference participants. Charlotte will speak on the human change agent utilizing ICT in education for transformation. Round of applause.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mrs. Crawford. Mrs. Henry Wilson, fellow presenters, conference participants, good morning. Good morning. Yeah, good morning. All right, so I'm going to be speaking with you. We're going to be talking for 40 minutes. Are you up to 40 minutes? No? Tell me, how many minutes are you up to? No, man, you can't say 20. I know it's break time, so I'm going to work with you. I have 40 minutes. What about 30? I take away 10 minutes from my time. You good with that? Everybody good with that? All right, great. So, Mrs. Crawford did the introduction, and she said that I'm going to speak about the human change agent. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And the first question we should ask is, who is the human change agent? You're asking that, right? No, participants, if you don't talk back to me, no, I'm going to take back my 40 minutes. You have to talk to me. Are you asking who is the human change agent? Yes or no? Yes. Good. So the human change agent, we're talking about people who act as catalysts for change. And before I start my presentation, I want to talk about some of those persons. So you have eLearning Jamaica. I remember when I started back in 2005, they had started just at the same time. So eLearning Jamaica, you're talking about catalysts for change, human change agents. Talking about the government, they were on the ICT bandwagon from just about the same time. You're talking about the telecom partners. You're talking about schools. I've met so many wonderful principals. You're talking about teachers. You're talking about parents. You're talking about students. And of course, my competitors. So we all decided that we wanted to do something for e-learning, and we did it over the last decade. And I wanted to give everybody a big round of applause. Yes. So I'm going to be speaking on everybody's behalf, all of us who worked very hard over the last decade to, work in the ICT sector, and some of the things that I have learned. Now, I am an entrepreneur by nature, right? Because if you've listened to some of my interviews on Profile and elsewhere, you would have heard me talk about selling in the markets at maybe about age 7. I remember back in the days, my mother would give me some callaloo to sell. And if she gave me 20 bundles of callaloo, I would cut them up and make 25. So I would take out some from one and put it in the next one, and I get 25. So you know who the 5 belonged to, right? 5 was mine, 20 was hers. When I'm finished selling, she would get her money, I get mine, and everybody okay. Right? Another time, if she said to me, okay, Charlotte, here's 10 bundles of callaloo to sell, and it's $1, I would put on 10 cents, so it becomes $1.10, and you know who the 10 cent belongs to, right? Everybody know who the 10 cent belongs to? Yeah. So the 10 cent belongs to me, and she gets her $1, and everybody was okay. So from a very young age, entrepreneurship is just in my blood. So let's talk about ICT now and human change agent. So in 2005, when I finished my MBA, I went for a job, giving you some history. And when I went for a job, I was totally broke. And there I was sitting in a room with some gentlemen. This was in Fort Lauderdale. And they began talking to me about technology in education, right? So, I went for a teaching job, I think. It was to teach some aspect of using technology in training, And years before that, I taught for approximately 6 years at Campion, ICT. I taught at UA, I taught at Merle Grove. I ran my own school for about 10 years prior to all of this, right? So, I was very versed in ICT. And they were talking to me about coming to work for them and using ICT, you know? And while they were talking, I was in the interview and they were talking to me and asking me questions. It dawned on me, look, I started GoGSAT in 2004. And these men were telling me that one of them especially said that he started out with IBM. And these guys were telling me how great they were. You know, they ran an institute of math and all of that. And I stopped the interview and I said, stop, gentlemen, stop. I want to interview all of you. Yeah. I want to ask you some questions because I have a great idea. So, you know, they stop and they look at me like, you know, this girl must be mad. And, you know, I started the interview. I said, listen, you know, if you guys are as good as you say you are, I have a great idea. I want to employ you because I don't matter what the job is. I'm going to employ all of you. And, you know, I started telling them about my idea, how I wanted to create a system for Jamaicans that persons could actually go online and prep for the GSAT. And, you know, they sat and they listened to me because I wasn't going to come back because here I had all the CEO and all the executives in the room. Why go back and, you know, write a proposal? I have them right there. I did my interview. I mean, I thought they were great. And now I'm going to hire them. I don't have any money to pay them. I explained that to them. But I had a great vision. And they bought into it. And that was how GoGSAT was started. So I started it initially. And then I hired this company in Fort Lauderdale to partner with me. And we started the whole business of test preparation online. Now, some of my experiences I want to talk to you about. Now, if you're in the room and you're thinking about getting into the online business or working with online, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I encountered. So I've been in this business for 11 years. Let me tell you some of the things I encountered. Now, when I came back to Jamaica, I have nobody registered on the website and, you know, finished my MBA. You know, I paid for that cash, and that's another story. So I didn't really have any school debt, but, you know, I was hustling because I'd finished school, I wasn't working for a while, and, you know, I wanted this business to get off the ground. Now, when you're bringing something new to a market, it's not going to be easy, right? No bank is going to give you any money to start, right? It may be a little bit easier now because persons have embraced the whole idea of technology in education, right? Yeah. And that is thanks to all my other change agents. So when I started, nobody would touch me. Nobody would give me any money to do anything. So what did I do? Printed my flyers, and I started walking around and handing out the flyers, right? And I remember going to Woolmer's prep school, and the principal there, Mrs. Spence, she was the first principal to embrace the whole idea of, yes, you know, students could actually go online and use the internet to prep. You know, she bought into the idea, and then other schools came on. The principal for Rollington Town, Dr. Bailey, came on, and other schools came on, and, you know, that is how it started. Now, I'm telling you, if you're thinking about going into ICT, if you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, then it's never easy. There were days when I sat and I listened for the phone to ring. And let me tell you something. Everything you do, you have to do it big. So when I sent out emails, I sent emails to all the schools in Jamaica. So I'm not sending emails to 10 schools because how it works is that if you send 10 emails out, one person is going to respond. So guess what? If you want 100 responses, what do you have to do? Yes. So it's a numbers game. So I'm telling you some of my secrets now. So yes, I sent emails to everybody. And I walked and I handed out flyers to everybody, right? And then, you know, the business started picking up. Persons started believing that they could actually use technology to improve learning. And you have to have a vision. You have to have a vision, and you have to believe in your vision. I tell you, nowadays it's a little bit easier because it's been proven that technology helps with learning. But you have to have a vision. And let me tell you something. My vision was that I wanted the entire Caribbean, not just Jamaica, to adopt using technology to help, especially with the standardized test preparation. So I'm going to give you some stories. So here I am in Fort Lauderdale now, sitting down, and I'm thinking, look, things kind of tight in Jamaica. Right? Because yes, I have schools on the programs, and yes, I have students using the program as well, but you know, things tight. And an idea came to me. I said, look, you need to get into the other Caribbean islands, especially the islands that use US dollars. Good idea, don't? Yeah. And I decided that I was going to approach the Turks and Caicos Islands because, you know, they use a dollar, it's a dollar for dollar. Because you come to Jamaica, you know how we stay. When somebody asks me what's the price and I say $149, you know them start working it out already. $14,900, yeah, you know how we are. So I decided, look, I'm going to approach the islands that use US dollars. So I took a plane to the Turks and Caicos. Back in the days, you know, you had Spirit Airline and it was $9.99. Didn't know where I was going, but I had a Jamaican friend. Yeah, big up for Jamaican friends. And she was teaching in the TCI. And she said, Charlotte, of course you can come, man. But, you know, she's struggling too. So, yes, she can put me, but, you know, I can sleep on her bed. But she can't pay a taxi fare for me from the airport or anything like that. And I'm going to tell you this story now. So we're talking as a change agent. So when I landed in the Turks and Caicos, I sat in the plane and I struck up conversation with this gentleman. And, you know, he asked me, where are you going? I said, listen, I'm going up to Blue Hills. You know, so I have no idea where Blue Hills is, right? But I'm going to Blue Hills. And he told me, yeah, he's going in the same direction. So when the plane landed, I said, listen, man, I'm going to need a ride from you, you know. Said, fine. So I took out my cell phone. Now, my cell phone dead from Miami. Took out my cell phone. And this is where now you call up on your grand spend days because I grew up in the inner city and I understand runnings. So I take out my cell phone and I turn it on and I started dialing. And my friend didn't come on the phone, but I'm pretending that my friend came on. I said, listen, Donna, I'm getting a ride from Mr. Jones. And his license plate number is 12345. And, you know, so I'm telling her, and I actually took the ride. So right now, him know that my friend know who I am with, and my friend knows the license plate number. And my friend knows his license plate numbers. Everybody understand? Okay. And let me tell you something, everyone. And so I went to the Turks and Caicos. And I think when I went to the Turks and Caicos, maybe if I had $300 US, believe me, I had a lot. And I decided I was going to meet with the Prime Minister, right? Because I always have big dreams, you know, big dreams. Yeah. And I was going to meet with the Prime Minister, and I was going to show all the teachers this wonderful program because I was going to leave with a contract. What was I going to leave with? What I said I was going to leave with? Good. And so, went to the Turks and Caicos, and I took what they call a jitney. In Jamaica, we call it a robot taxi, and I went around to the different schools, and I scouted out the place, and I made my appointment with the Prime Minister. And let me tell you something. You have to have your vision. Remember, we're talking about as a change agent, you have to have your vision. And you always must be prepared. What you must be? What you must have? Over on this side, what you must have? Over on this side, what you must be? Let me tell you about preparation and vision now. So I am having this vision that I'm going to meet with the Prime Minister, right? Cool. And I am prepared. So I had my suit, and I rented a car for 1 day, because when you're going to meet with the people's Prime Minister now, you have to look like you're successful. Can't go look like, you know, it's the last $300 you have. Okay. And I got to meet with the Prime Minister, and he got all the teachers from the different islands to meet with me, and I did my presentation. And I left the TCI with a check for I think it was $46,000 US. Right. I'll tell you another story. I was talking about change agent now. And, you know, because you're so successful, you know, you're thinking to yourself, of course I can replicate in the Bahamas. Why not? Their dollar is 1 for 1. So I'm telling you these stories because what I want you to take from my presentation is this. Look, when you decide that you're going to do something, if it is not working here, I mean, you're making a few dollars, think elsewhere. We're global now. Nothing is stopping us from being competitive anywhere in the world that we want to be. Everybody get that? I don't ever get a clap for that? All right, so let me tell you about the Bahamas experience. So now I did Turks and Caicos, and I decided that I was going to do the Bahamas. Oh, and before I tell you about the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, when we designed the system for Jamaica, you must realize that all the other islands have a similar exam to the GSAT. So that part I did skip. So everybody has their exam that is similar to the GSAT, just a little tweaking. The only thing that is different really is the social studies. Everybody get that? So the math is the same, the English is the same, the science is basically the same. The only difference that you have is the social studies. So here we went into the Bahamas now. So I decided that I was going to go to the Bahamas. It's the same formula. You take a plane, you book a motel, you know, in a nice neighborhood, but you're not staying at 5-star yet, because you don't reach 5-star money. So you're going to stay somewhere that is affordable, and you're going to walk the streets. And let me tell you something about the power now of the Almighty God, how awesome He is. And so when I went to the Bahamas, I booked in a motel, and I started handing out my flyers, because I'm doing the same thing that I'm replicating what I did in Jamaica, what I did in the Turks and Caicos. And also, I'm going to see the who? Thank you. Well, I like to know where I'm going with. Right, so this time I actually spoke to the Prime Minister's wife, because she was a principal of a school at the time, so I met with her. But let me tell you how this works out now. So I went to the Bahamas and I took my food. So I'm telling you now, change agent, we're talking about change now. We want this thing in the Bahamas. So I took my bread, I took my sardines, I took my tang, you know, the thing that you use to make your juice, and you're good. So that means you cut back on expenses for food. You're good. All you need is the $9.99 plain fare, and you're in the Bahamas, you can launch. So forget about all the things you learn in graduate school about how you need a company there to launch you off. You have your vision. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your vision, and you go and make it happen. So when I reached the Bahamas now, I started handing out my flyers, and I'm talking to everybody now, because you have to be passionate about your thing too. So everybody I meet, I want to tell them about the website. It's like, you know how, I'm not use that example, but you have to be passionate. So there I am now at the stoplight, and I'm handing out my flyers. And I see a gentleman, and I say, listen, man, we have a wonderful system, man. Listen, you see the students who are preparing for the GLAT, their exam is called a GLAT. They can log on to this website, and they can take quizzes, and, you know, they can take mock exams. And if they want to talk to a tutor, they just click the button that says chat room is open. And listen, we don't tolerate any foolishness in the chat room, you know. We have real teachers who are in the chat room. They can ask questions, and, you know, the teachers drive the discussion. Sometimes the students drive the discussion, and I'm just passionate. And the gentleman said to me, do you know who I am? No. And he says, like he would say, you know, I'm the head of the Teachers Association. And guess what? Tomorrow we're having our conference. And guess who is going to be speaking at the conference tomorrow? But you remember something I said? You always have to be what? So you know, even though I wasn't going to the Bahamas to speak to all the teachers, I had my suit. I always walk with a nice dress or your suit. So I had my suit in my bag, and, you know, I was able to go and make my presentation, and I left the Bahamas with a number of schools using the product. And with, not even clap. Right, I was still talking about change agent now. And you can just imagine, so we did the same thing for Barbados, we did the same thing for the entire region, right? And we also replicated for CXC. So, you know, we did GSAT, we did the primary level. So think about all the English-speaking islands in the Caribbean. They have their exams similar to the GSAT. So we did all the English-speaking islands, the similar exam to the GSAT, you know, the getting into high school exam. And then we decided, hey, if we're doing this for the GSAT level, why not do it for the CXC level? So, of course, we started another system called CaribbeanExams.com, and on that system, we prepare students now who are taking the CXC. We give them resource material, online tutors, and so on. So, you have to have a clear vision, and, of course, in all of that, you have to be patient. Because sometimes now, as a change agent, it's not going to happen overnight. Everybody with me? Yeah, you have to be patient. Now, you also have to build strong relationships. And I'm going to tell you about building strong relationships now. Now, in ICT, in this business, it can't be about making money. Yes, you want to make money. And you have to make money because you live with money, right? You know, Ecclesiastics tell you that, you know, money is what? Not the root, no, man. Money answereth all things. Listen, when you read the Bible, you need to take the parts that apply to you, you know. So not the root part. You're talking about, no, money answereth all things, Bible. So yes, money answereth all things, but it can't be about money. Now, let me tell you what it has to be about. It has to be about wanting to make sure that you're impacting change. It has to be wanting to make sure that students are going to benefit from what you are doing. Everybody agree with that? Yeah, so you have to make sure that you want to help as many students as possible. So I'm going to tell you how I figured out how to do that. So with my system now, if I'm selling my system for $1, and I'm giving away so many clues, I'm telling you what I did to become successful. If I am selling for $1 and a parent call and they only had 50 cents, even to this day, I take the 50 cents and I say, you owe me 50 cents, you can pay me that 50 cents next month. Because the whole idea is that I want that child on the system, I want that child to benefit. But now get him a clap for that? Yeah, so it has to be about how you can impact change. So you can't be sticking out that, listen, I am going to become rich out of this, and I want all the money, and I'm not going to facilitate nobody who cannot afford my product. It can't be about that. And I'm just telling you my experience. So you have to build trust, you have to build relationships. And let me tell you something about my people in Jamaica. Once you give them good service, the majority will come back and pay you the 50 cents. Sometimes they'll pay you 25 cents and tell you how things are hard and stuff, but they'll pay you, they'll work with you. So if you're willing to work with them and their children, they're also willing to work with you. So I've had a great 11 years. I've done well out of this business, and it's because of the relationships that you build. And what you'll find too is that you'll have a parent who starts with you at grade 3, and would you believe that at grade 13, that parent is still with you? Yeah. So you have had parents who started out preparing students for the grade 4 literacy test. They come on at grade 5. They come on at grade 6. Maybe they skip grade 7, 8, and 9 because you know how it goes. But when this child hits grade 10, they're calling you again and say, look, my child used Go GSAT. Now we're preparing for CXE. Want my child to use it again. So you have to build those strong relationships. Another thing I learned as a human change agent is that you have to be able to adapt and change. What you have to do? And I'm going to tell you a few things how I adapted and changed. Now, 1. So when the product came out back in 2005, you had your quizzes. And that was, for the most part, all that was on the system. And then you started talking to teachers. And then teachers started saying to you, look, we don't just want drill and practice. Right? Because you have some teachers who are just on the ball. They'll tell you, we want a product that is going to focus on the higher order thinking skills. So they want the analysis, they want the synthesis, they want the comprehension. And we went back to the drawing board. So now, in the program, we built a section in where students can actually answer short answer questions. They can get their essays graded. So when a child comes onto the system, it's not just multiple choice. You have a question that is going to test those higher order skills, and child can answer, and a teacher will grade, give comments, not just give A, B, and C, or 16 out of 20, but you're going to give detailed comments, and you're going to work with the child. So that was built into the system. Teachers came to us too and said, listen, man, if we're going to use the product, we want some handouts. We want to go to the website, and we want to print a handout that has 20 multiple choice questions on the eye, or the ear, or the nose. Or we want some puzzles, some crossword puzzles, educational crossword puzzles. Parents came to us and said, listen, we want games on the site. We want educational games. So one of the things that you'll have to learn as a human change agent is that you have to adapt and, yes, and we did that. Now, I want to talk about some of the obstacles. How many minutes I have left? All right. Let's talk about some of the obstacles now. Everybody ready to hear some of the obstacles? All right. What about this side? You ready to hear some of the obstacles? Good. All right. So now, one day I remember I was sitting in my living room, and I sent out a whole bunch of emails. And I tell you, when I'm sending out emails, I send out like 1,000 emails. I think back in the day, you could send maybe 500 emails per account. Like if you have a Yahoo account, you can send out 500 email, or a Gmail account. For the day, they give you a limit. You know that, right? Now, what I would do now, I would create like 4 or 5 different email addresses. I wonder if people hearing my strategies. Yeah, because look, I am on the hustle, I can't send out 500 emails alone. So I want to send out 2,000 emails for the day, so I need 4 email accounts. So the first email account is admin@gogsat.com. Then the next email account might be customer service at gogsat.com. The next email might be services at go. The next email might be whatever. But I have my emails, and I'm sitting down and I'm sending out 500 from this, 500 from that. And this was before, you know, your MailChimp and those kind of things. Right. Now, I remember one day I sent out so many emails. And the only email I got back in, you know, the email that says mail a day, man, like when it bounced. And seriously, and I felt like crying because the only email that was coming back was bounce emails. I remember being in my apartment and the phone is not ringing, and I'm wondering if I can still talk. So I have to get up and say, la, 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 just to make sure that I can still talk because nobody's talking to me. I'm there alone and I'm doing this business. I'm on the hustle. So let me tell you something. When you are a change agent, when you decide that you're going to go into this business of doing something to create change, because of course persons tell me, why not get a job? That's easy, you have a master's. You know, you were successful. You had the highest GCE passes in Jamaica at the time while I was at campaign. You know, you could get a job. You taught at UA. Get a job. No, I wanted to do this. And I'm telling you, phone didn't ring. No emails were coming back to me. But I kept going on. So listen, those were some of the obstacles, right? Now, no registration. And with no registration comes no what? No money. But let me tell you something. It comes back to what I spoke about before, that you have to have a clear vision. You, as the change agent, must realize that, look, if I do X, Y is going to happen. So you know that, listen, if I build this business, and if I put in the X amount of X number of hours, and if I go on the road and hand out 5,000 flyers, and if I do this, you know it's going to happen. So it might not be happening now, but I knew that down the road it would happen. So, no money. Handling the no's. And I want to stop and talk a little bit about handling the no's. Now, I remember in 2007, every year, I have my prep schools because, you know, even though you have your primary schools who use your program, the prep school parents are quicker to sign up for the program, right? And let me tell you, every year you have certain prep schools that you would call and try to get the schools on board. And I remember in 2007, I would call a particular prep school and I would speak to the principal. You know, I said, you know, at the time, good morning, my name is Shalette, I'm calling from GoGSAT, and she don't even let me finish. She said, no, I don't want your program. In 2008, I'm doing the rounds again, and I'm calling this particular school, because remember, when people tell you no, they're not telling you no, it's not you. What they're really saying, what no really means is that not today, not now. That's what no means, not now. So anybody who knows me knows how persistent I am, because no to me, I don't hear no, I hear not right now, because maybe the principal is busy, maybe she's dealing with teachers, you know, she doesn't have any time for me right today, right now. So 2008, I'm calling this very same school again. Good morning, my name is Charlotte East, calling from GoGSAT. I don't want your product. 2009, I'm doing the rounds again, serious story, and I'm calling, and I call this school. And before I could even finish my introduction, she said, you know, I was just about to call you. And that school has been using my product ever since. All right, so now we talk about handling the no's. So as a change agent, you're gonna get the no's, and you're gonna have to learn how to handle the no's. All right. I want to talk about now some positives. Do you want to hear about the positives? Yes, good. Now, some of the positives that happen, you know, as a human change agent. Recognition. I remember in 2008, I got a call from Harvard University, a professor there, and he looked at the product and he was so impressed. And he said, listen, we want to work with you. Our professors will log on to the site and mentor these students in the afternoons. So, you know, Jamaican students who have logged on, who are signed up on the program, they can actually get help from their professors free of charge. That was a really awesome thing. And also, thank you. And also, we've won 4 national awards. So, you know, the Bureau of Standard in association with the Scientific Research Council, they have this national award for technology in education. We won four awards in total, so that was a good thing. And, you know, we've forged some awesome partnerships, and I want to tell you about that quickly, because I hear that we need to tell you about the free things that we have. Now, some of the partnerships that I'm really, really proud of over the 10 years, one, with the TCI government, we did a program for the prisons. Once you go into prison, you can actually go back to school on our online site, on our online high school. Isn't that awesome? Yeah, awesome. We also forged a partnership with Macmillan, where they actually provided us with resources to use on our grade 1 to 3 system. That was awesome as well. Some of the positives, we have parents who have used our program, and it takes the stress off them. Because sometimes as a parent, they don't remember some of the simple things, you know, the fractions and all those things that they did 30 years ago. They don't remember that. So, you know, parents will come back to you and tell you how great the program has been. Of course, we have had over 150 students who have won scholarship every single year. When you look at the government scholarship winners in Jamaica, over half of the participants register on GoGSAT. That's a fact. Now, thank you. And I want to tell you this. One of the most important partnerships that we have is with Digicel. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. Now, last year, we did a product with Digicel. It's called learninghub.online. Now, this is so awesome because I'm going to tell you why. Now, with this product, you can actually go online without having data on your phone. Isn't that something? Yeah. You don't need data. You don't need a data plan. So you can go to the learninghub.online website without data on your phone. You don't need credit. You don't need a data plan. You don't need anything. So they have made the site 0 rated. Now, what is on the site? You have all the learning resources for grades 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 13, all the notes. So we've taken the curriculum and all the topics that the children need to know at the different grades. We have placed that on Learning Hub. And guess what? Digicel has actually made that free for every single Digicel subscriber in Jamaica. So that is awesome. So no data needed, no data plan, no credit on your phone. You can actually access the Learning Hub.online, all the learning resources for free. In addition, they've actually paid to get a tutor on the site, and that is free as well. So once somebody is signed up, in the evenings there's a tutor on the site. Child can go to the website, log into the chat room, and get live assistance. So it's not just getting the resources, not just getting the notes, but you can get your tutors. For teachers, you have worksheets, you have handouts that you can download and print absolutely free of cost. So that's our latest partnership, and that is really, really, really awesome. All right. So in wrapping up, as a human change agent over the last 11 years, it has been a wonderful, wonderful journey. I mean, I've shared just some of the, just snippets of what I've done over the last 11 years, but it has been awesome. We've forged great partnerships. We have worked hard because, like I tell you, I mean, you know, we had our vision and we actually worked our vision, right? So I want to leave you with this. Something I want you all to remember. Now, take this away from my presentation. Remember now, whatever you decide that you want to do with your ICT knowledge, you can, all right? As long as you believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. And as long as you are willing to go out there and make it happen. You can't make anything or anyone distract you or deter you. Another time when I meet with you, I'll tell you how I ended up living in my vehicle to make all of this happen, because that's another story. But I'm telling you, look, believe in yourself. Believe in your ICT dream. And let me tell you something. Once you have fixity of purpose and you focus, it will happen. I am living proof that you can make it in this industry. Thank you.
Charlotte, I believe they wanted you to go on and on and on. But we do have, what you want, honey bun?